I knew I was doomed the moment I fell in love with my best friend. Henry and I had been inseparable since high school, and now, in our junior year of college, we were still stuck together, sharing a dorm, eating meals together, even staying up late cramming for exams side by side. If someone asked, we were just best friends, the kind of pair that did everything together. But the truth was, I loved him. Not in the way best friends were supposed to love each other, but in the way that made my heart ache whenever I watched him. In the way that made my fingers twitch whenever he sat too close, but I had to pretend it didn't affect me. Because Henry was straight. He had never shown interest in anyone. Not girls, not guys. And while he was undeniably good-looking, with sharp features and dark eyes that could make anyone weak in the knees, he never entertained any of the attention thrown his way. He was cold, distant. He hated it when people touched his stuff or even sat on his bed. Except for me. I was the only one allowed in his space. I could borrow his hoodie without him complaining. I could collapse onto his bed when mine was a mess. If anyone else tried, Henry would glare them into submission. And maybe that was why I was still holding on to this hopeless love, because he made me feel like I was special, even if it wasn't in the way I wanted. Ray. I snapped out of my thoughts, blinking up at Henry. He was sitting on his desk, flipping through a textbook, but his gaze was on me. "You're staring again," he said flatly. "Crap." I laughed it off. "Sorry, I was zoning out." Henry gave me a long, unreadable look before returning to his book. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to focus on my laptop screen. I needed to get over this. I needed to stop hoping for something that would never happen. But then, of course, life decided to throw me straight into a nightmare. Later that night? Truth or dare? I should have known something was off when our dorm neighbor Eric smirked at me. The small gathering in our room had started harmlessly, just a bunch of us unwinding after a long week. But then someone suggested a game, and now here I was, regretting every decision that led me to this moment. Truth? I said hesitantly. Boring, Eric groaned. Fine. Have you ever had a crush on someone in this room? My stomach dropped. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. Nope. It wasn't a lie. Henry wasn't just a crush. He was everything. Eric looked disappointed, but the game moved on. When Henry's turn came, he picked Dare, unsurprisingly. He never cared much for these games, but he also didn't back down from anything. I dare you. The guy next to Eric grinned. To kiss Ray. The room went silent. My breath caught in my throat. What? I blurted out, heat flooding my face. Come on, just a quick kiss. Someone laughed. You guys are practically married anyway. I turned to Henry, expecting him to refuse immediately. Expecting him to scoff and say no, but he didn't. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Henry, you don't have to. Rules are rules, he said simply. I could barely process what was happening as the group cheered. My hands clenched into fists, my heart beating so fast I thought it might give out. This was bad. This was so bad. If I kissed him, would he be disgusted? Would he figure out how I felt? Would he pull away, wiping his lips like it was the worst thing that had ever happened to him? I swallowed hard, forcing my hands to stay steady as I slowly leaned in. Henry didn't move. He just watched me. My lips barely brushed against his. It was the lightest kiss possible, barely even there, but I felt it like a spark straight through my body. And in that second, just for a split second, I thought I saw the corner of Henry's lips twitch, like he was smiling. No. No way. It had to be my imagination. The moment ended too quickly. I pulled back immediately, heart hammering. I couldn't even look at him. The game went on, but I barely heard anything. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about him, about that unreadable look in his eyes. And I had no idea that after that night, everything would change. The door clicked shut behind the last of our friends, leaving behind a heavy silence. The air in the dorm felt different, charged, like something invisible was pressing down on me. I couldn't look at Henry. The kiss from earlier still burned on my lips, and my heart hadn't stopped racing since. I could still feel the faintest trace of his warmth, his unreadable stare lingering in my mind. Did it mean anything to him? Did he feel... I shook the thought away. No, I couldn't think like that. Act normal. I feel so sleepy, I mumbled, making my way toward my bed, keeping my gaze fixed on the floor. If I could just crawl under the covers and pretend to be asleep, I could escape this unbearable tension. But just as I reached my bed, a strong arm suddenly wrapped around my wrist. Before I could react, I was yanked backward, my back colliding against something firm and warm, Henry's chest. I froze. His breath brushed against my ear, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. "The bed sheets are dirty," Henry murmured. His voice was low, close, almost too close. "You shouldn't sleep on them. I'll clean them tomorrow. Sleep on my bed tonight." My mind went blank. I glanced at my bed. He was right. Our friends had been eating there, leaving behind crumpled chip bags and an obvious stain from spilled juice. I hadn't even noticed earlier, too distracted by everything else. But still, sleep on his bed? I turned, ready to protest, but Henry was already pulling me toward his side of the room. His grip was firm, yet effortless, as if there was no room for argument. Before I knew it, I was sitting on the edge of his bed, and my heart was hammering in my chest. "I can just clean it now." "Ray," I swallowed. Henry never raised his voice, never needed to. Just my name, spoken in that steady, unreadable tone, was enough to shut me up. He pulled back the covers and, without hesitation, climbed in, leaving just enough space for me. Then, with a tug on my wrist, he guided me down beside him. I should have resisted. I should have at least pretended to argue. But my body moved on its own. The bed was soft, his scent surrounding me, something faintly cool, like the crisp air after a storm. It was familiar, comforting, and yet tonight it felt entirely different. Then, just as I was about to shift away, Henry's arm came around me. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't the first time we'd slept like this. Henry always said he liked keeping me close, that it made him feel safe. I never understood it. He was the last person who needed protection. No one dared to mess with him. And yet, when it came to moments like this, he held on to me like I was the only thing anchoring him. I'd always liked it, but tonight was different. Because now I couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. I was hyper-aware of every little thing, the steady rise and fall of his chest against my back, the way his fingers rested lightly against my side, the faint warmth of his breath on my neck. It was too much. Yet somehow it wasn't enough. I swallowed hard, squeezing my eyes shut. This was dangerous. I needed to stop overthinking, stop wanting things that weren't mine to have. Henry was just being Henry. This wasn't new. And yet, just before sleep pulled me under, I could have sworn his hold on me tightened. I groggily opened my eyes, blinking at the ceiling as the remnants of sleep clung to me. My body felt unusually heavy, and for a moment I couldn't understand why, until the events of last night came rushing back. The kiss, sleeping in Henry's bed, his arm wrapped around me. I bolted upright, my heart racing. My hand immediately went to the empty space beside me, cold. Henry wasn't there. In fact, he wasn't anywhere in the room. I frowned, glancing at the clock. My eyes widened. 10:15 a.m. Crap. How did I sleep so late? Thankfully, it was Sunday, so no classes, but still, this wasn't like me. Henry, being the morning person he was, had probably been up for hours. I sighed, running a hand through my hair before dragging myself out of bed. A quick glance at my bed confirmed what I already suspected. The bed sheets were missing. Of course, Henry must have already taken care of them. The man was obsessed with cleanliness. But where had he gone this early on a Sunday? Before I could dwell on it further, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up and saw a message from Eric. "You promised to have lunch with me today. Let's go to the new restaurant." I sighed. Right. I had promised him. I hesitated, my thoughts still circling back to Henry. Should I wait for him? Try to find out where he went? But my stomach growled in protest. Considering the chaos in my mind after last night, maybe it wasn't a bad idea to get out for a bit and clear my head. With that decision made, I quickly showered, changed into something casual, and headed out. Eric was already waiting for me at the restaurant when I arrived, casually scrolling through his phone. He looked up and grinned. "Finally, you're here. I thought you stood me up for Henry." I rolled my eyes and sat down. "You're being dramatic." The food arrived quickly, and for a while, the conversation was light. But just as I was starting to relax, Eric suddenly leaned in with a smirk. "Ray, you look exhausted. Did Henry take things too far last night?" I choked on my noodles. Coughing, I grabbed my drink and took a sip, glaring at him. "What the hell do you mean by that?" Eric burst out laughing. "Relax, you were looking so distracted. I just wanted to mess with you." I scowled. "How is that supposed to cheer me up?" Still grinning, Eric leaned back and rested his chin on his palm, looking at me with an amused expression. "But seriously, How long do you think you can pretend? My stomach twisted at his words. Pretend what? Eric raised an eyebrow. Come on, you really think we don't notice? Everyone in our friend circle can tell you have a crush on Henry. I froze. My chopsticks slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the plate. Was it that obvious? My mind spun, but I couldn't come up with a response. Before I could even try, a cold, familiar voice cut through the air. Ray. My breath hitched. I turned around so fast I nearly knocked over my drink. Henry stood a few feet away, a takeout bag in one hand. His expression was unreadable, his dark eyes locked onto me. But there was something in them, something sharp, intense. And for the first time in a long time, I had no idea what he was thinking. Henry took a step closer to the table, his dark gaze unwavering as he looked at me. I was still caught off guard, my mind scrambling to understand why he was here. You? What are you doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Henry's eyes flickered to Eric for a brief second before settling back on me. I came to buy lunch. For us. I blinked. For us? Before I could even process that, Henry casually placed the takeout bag on the table and shot Eric another cold glance. Eric, who had been acting smug just moments ago, suddenly shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He let out a nervous chuckle. We were just having lunch. Do you want to join us? Henry didn't even acknowledge the invitation. His focus remained solely on me. Let's go, he said, his tone leaving little room for argument. I already bought food. We'll eat in the dorm. I hesitated. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about leaving with Henry. But the way he was acting, the tension in his voice, the way he was ignoring Eric entirely, something felt different. Eric, gathering some courage, cleared his throat. But we already ordered food here. It would be wasted. Henry's jaw tensed like he was about to argue, and that's when my stomach betrayed me. A loud grumble echoed between us. The silence was deafening. Both Henry and Eric turned to me in unison. Heat rushed to my face. Eric burst out laughing. See? Do you really want to make Ray wait until you get back to the dorm? Henry sighed, clearly annoyed but unable to argue. Without another word, he sat down at the table, pulling the takeout bag closer. Instead of eating the food from the restaurant, he took out a neatly packed container and placed it in front of me. I looked down. Chicken fried rice. My favorite. I glanced at Henry, surprised. You eat, he said simply, as if it wasn't a big deal. I didn't need to be told twice. The smell alone was making my mouth water, and after the awkwardness of the morning, I desperately needed something to ground me. I dug in immediately, savoring the familiar taste. Henry, on the other hand, barely touched his food. He was eating, but his gaze kept shifting to me, watching my every movement. Eric, sensing the shift in atmosphere, cleared his throat. So, Henry, you're really taking care of Ray, huh? Henry didn't respond. He just continued eating, his expression unreadable. Eric chuckled awkwardly. You know, I was just teasing him earlier. No hard feelings, right? Henry didn't even glance at him. I swallowed, feeling a strange tension settle in my chest. Something had changed. Something about Henry had changed. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to find out what it meant. As we finished our meal, I reached for my wallet, remembering my promise. I'll pay this time, I said, looking at Eric. Last time he had treated me, so it was only fair. But before I could even take out my card, Henry's hand landed on mine, stopping me. I'll pay, he said firmly. I hesitated. But Henry didn't wait for me to argue. He simply took the bill and walked off toward the counter without another word. I sighed. There was no winning against him. With nothing left to do, I stepped outside with Eric, waiting for Henry to return. Eric suddenly chuckled beside me. I turned to him, confused. What's so funny? Eric smirked, leaning in slightly. Well, I see. So that's how it is. His cryptic words made no sense to me. What are you talking about? Instead of answering, he suddenly reached out and pulled me closer, catching me completely off guard. I stiffened. Eric? He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. Can't you tell? He likes you too, Eric whispered. I'm just helping you two. You better thank me later. My brain short-circuited. Likes me? Henry? Before I could even process his words, a strong force yanked me backward. I stumbled, finding myself pressed against a firm chest. A familiar scent surrounded me. Henry. I looked up, startled. His arm was wrapped tightly around my waist, pulling me against him. His expression was dangerous, eyes dark, jaw clenched. He wasn't looking at me, though. His piercing gaze was locked onto Eric. Even Eric, who was usually laid back, looked a little nervous under Henry's sharp stare. Then, with an awkward laugh, Eric raised his hands in surrender. "Well, thanks for the meal. See you guys later." And just like that, he turned on his heel and hurried away, leaving me alone with Henry. I swallowed hard. Henry's grip around my waist hadn't loosened. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Slowly, I looked up at him. "Henry?" I whispered, confused. He didn't answer right away. His dark eyes were locked onto Eric's retreating figure, his usual cold expression sharper, more dangerous. The way his arm curled around me, almost possessive, sent a shiver down my spine. "Let's go," he finally said, his voice quieter than usual. He didn't loosen his hold right away, but after a second, his grip softened. Instead of pulling away completely, his hand lingered at my lower back, guiding me forward. The walk back to our dorm was silent. The kind of silence that wasn't comfortable, but heavy. Charged. Henry didn't say a word, and I was too caught up in my own thoughts to break the quiet. Had Henry always been like this? Or was I just noticing it now? When we got to our room, I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I turned to him, forcing a small, awkward smile. Thanks for paying for lunch. You really didn't have to." "Don't let people get that close to you." I blinked, caught off guard. "Huh?" Henry's jaw tightened. "Eric, don't let him touch you like that again." My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a big deal. It is to me. The air felt thick, too heavy to breathe. I swallowed. "Why?" Henry didn't answer right away. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Just don't." That wasn't an answer. But I couldn't bring myself to ask again. My thoughts were already in chaos, and the way Henry was acting wasn't helping. "Go take a shower," he muttered. "I'll clean up." I stared at him for a moment before nodding and heading to the bathroom. Under the warm water, I tried to make sense of everything. Was Henry jealous? No, that didn't make sense. He was straight, right? Then why was he acting so possessive? When I came back, rubbing my hair with a towel, I immediately noticed something. My bed was still missing its sheets. Henry was already lying in his bed, scrolling through his phone like nothing was wrong. I sighed, glancing at the empty space where my sheets used to be. "Guess I'm sleeping without a blanket tonight." "You're sleeping here," Henry said, not looking up. I froze. I can just grab a blanket and... "Come here, Ray." His voice was softer now. Not a command, a request. I hesitated before slowly stepping toward the bed. He pulled the covers back, waiting. This wasn't the first time we'd slept like this. But tonight, something felt different. I slid under the blanket, trying to ignore how my heart was pounding. Almost immediately, Henry's arm came around me, pulling me close, his body warm against mine. I stiffened. This was normal. This was Henry, so why did it feel so different now? His breath was warm against the back of my neck. "Go to sleep." I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened. But sleep didn't come easily. Not when all I could think about was how close he was, and how much I wanted him to be even closer. I knew something was off the moment I woke up. Henry was already dressed, sitting on his bed, scrolling through his phone. But unlike usual, his attention wasn't really on the screen. It was on me. The second my eyes fluttered open, his gaze locked onto mine, intense and unreadable. "Morning," I mumbled, stretching. He didn't respond, just kept watching me. Weird. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "You good?" Still no answer. He was acting strange. Stranger than usual. At first, I ignored it. I went through my morning routine, getting ready for the day. But Henry's presence was inescapable. He stayed close, too close. Everywhere I went, his hand brushed against mine, his shoulder pressed against me. His touch lingered longer than usual. He even fixed my collar for me before we left the dorm, his fingers grazing my neck, sending shivers down my spine. And it wasn't just that. Whenever someone talked to me, especially Eric, Henry's entire demeanor shifted. His jaw clenched, his glare sharp. He barely let anyone get near me, answering for me when people asked questions, standing between me and whoever dared to come too close. By midday, I couldn't take it anymore. We were back in our dorm, and Henry was standing by the window, scrolling through his phone, or pretending to. I took a deep breath. "Okay, seriously, what is wrong with you lately?" Henry's fingers stilled over his phone. Then, without looking up, he said something that made my heart nearly stop. "You've liked me for a long time, haven't you?" The air left my lungs. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. Did I just hear that right? I swallowed. What are you talking about? I forced out a laugh, hoping to brush it off. Don't joke like that. He finally turned to look at me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, piercing eyes, were locked onto mine, unrelenting. I'm not joking, he said quietly. Panic flooded through me. You're wrong, I blurted. I mean, we're best friends. Why would I? Henry took a step forward. I instinctively stepped back. Another step. I backed up again until I felt the edge of the desk press against my lower back. There was nowhere else to go. Henry didn't stop. He leaned in, his face so close I could feel his breath. My heart felt like it was about to explode. I don't want to see you with anyone else, he murmured, his voice softer now. My breath hitched. I want you to look only at me. And then, he kissed me. It wasn't like the one from Truth or Dare. This time, it was real. His lips moved against mine, slow and deep, pulling me into something I had only ever dreamed of. My mind went blank, my entire body frozen in shock. But as the warmth of his lips lingered, as his fingers curled gently around my wrist, grounding me, I kissed him back. I didn't know when my hands found his shirt, gripping onto him like he was the only thing keeping me standing. But when I did, Henry pressed in closer, deepening the kiss, like he had been waiting for this just as long as I had. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless. Henry rested his forehead against mine, his hand still holding my wrist. His eyes, filled with something I couldn't quite name, searched mine. Say it, he whispered. I swallowed, my hands trembling slightly as they clung to his shirt. I had spent years hiding my feelings, denying them, convincing myself that I could never have this. But Henry was here, holding me, kissing me, looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I exhaled shakily and finally let the words slip out. I love you. I didn't know how long we stood there, Henry's forehead resting against mine, his warm breath mingling with my own. My heart was still racing for my confession, and Henry, he just kept looking at me, as if he was memorizing every inch of my face. Then finally, I found my voice. When did you start liking me? I whispered. Henry didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached up, brushing his thumb lightly over my cheek. His touch so gentle it sent shivers down my spine. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe I always did. I blinked, caught off guard. What? Henry exhaled, his other hand slipping around my waist, keeping me close. I always knew you liked me, he continued, his voice softer now. I just ignored it. My breath hitched. You knew? He nodded. I saw it in the way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't paying attention. In the way you always let me get away with things no one else would. In the way you stayed, even when I was impossible to deal with. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I was afraid, he admitted, his brows furrowing slightly. Afraid that if I acknowledged it, I'd want more. And if I wanted more, I might lose you. My chest ached at his words. Henry, he shook his head, a small, almost self-deprecating smile appearing on his lips. I told myself it was better this way, that as long as you were by my side, even as just a friend, it was enough. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Henry, strong, confident, always in control. Henry had been afraid of losing me? But then, he continued, his fingers curling slightly against my waist, that stupid Truth or Dare game happened. My cheeks burned at the memory. The kiss. The one that changed everything. That was the first time I lost control, he murmured, his eyes darkening slightly. And when I saw you with Eric after that, You got jealous, I finished for him. Henry didn't deny it. His lips pressed into a thin line. I hated it, he admitted. Seeing him so close to you, watching you smile at someone that wasn't me. I stared at him, my heart clenching. All this time I thought I was the only one suffering, the only one desperately hiding my feelings, afraid of ruining everything. But Henry had been going through the same thing. I reached up, my fingers hesitantly brushing against his cheek. You idiot, I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. We wasted so much time. Henry let out a soft chuckle, leaning into my touch. Yeah, he agreed. We did. For a moment, we just stood there, our foreheads touching, our hands holding onto each other like we were afraid to let go. But this time, there was no more running, no more pretending, no more fear. Henry pulled me closer, his arms wrapping securely around me. "You've always been mine, Ray," he murmured against my hair. "You just didn't realize it." I felt my heart swell, warmth spreading through my chest as I buried my face in his shoulder. He was mine too, and this time I wouldn't let go.